What's up, everybody? It's that time again. Cheers. It's the afternoon. And well, I don't have a Semmler with me or a Canal Bula or whatever, but I do have my coffee. So, coffee, tea, whatever floats your boat. Hope you have one too. Hope it's been a lovely day for you all. So today, another video, and I was thinking, what caught my interest recently, over the past 24 hours since the last one. And what's been at the top of the Reddit, what's been interesting to me is the apparition of this developer who's admittedly new to the dev team, but the developer Ryan, right, with Valve. And that to me is really interesting because all of a sudden we have a developer. The other devs have been vocal in the past. They have spoken in the past. Ito is the one that comes to mind, really, that stands out. Usually when shit hits the fan, he's the one who seems to be making a post about it, or he's keeping an eye on things. In general, it seems to be him. But in recent times, over the past couple of days, we've had a new developer come into the scene who's actually been trying to answer some questions. I think at the top of the subreddit was this Olaf Meister gets CSGO'd, right? And this was kind of like the tongue-in-cheek joke that everybody was making. Haha, get CSGO'd. Either it means that the bullets aren't registering, just weird stuff, jumping shots, whatever, right? And so he actually came in and into this thread and decided to make a post analyzing this sort of scenario from a developer point of view, saying, well, this is what I see, right? His first shot goes left, that didn't connect, but then, the way that the M4 works, the next few bullets should be more accurate, and those look kind of dead on. Doesn't really, you can't speak to the quality of the Faceit servers, the servers that were being played, but he kind of gave an idea, and I like this, right? He kind of gave an idea of just how many factors could go into our shots not hitting the way that we think they should, right? Because this is a game, it's going off a field, there's a lot of factors involved, aim, moving while aiming, he even says, RNG, right? When you're moving and you're spraying, there's an element of randomness in that, just because they want to discourage people from doing that, from moving and spraying with an M4, for example. There needs to be some kind of cost, some kind of risk. And so he actually wrecks some guy afterwards, right, who says, oh yeah, moving and spraying. And he's like, well, please, if you, and this kind of, he kind of shows how the devs think, right? He's like, if you can put in dev speak, right, a post together giving us your philosophy on a way to punish somebody who's moving and spraying, we're all ears. And that's the main thing. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about my personal experiences dealing with the devs, talking, with the devs at different events, right? At the majors is when they usually come out. They've gone to other events in the past, but the ones that I get to see them at are the majors. And kind of their reasoning behind, and general, developer reasoning behind how they interact with the community, what they say, what they don't say, these sorts of things. I mean, I'm going to keep it brief. This is a bit of a broad topic, but just wanted to throw some thoughts out there, right? So I think what people need to keep in mind is that when you're a developer, and I think I've seen this in the past as well with Bloodline Champions, right? Stunlock Studios back in the day, the game that I got into esports with pretty much. It's a game called Bloodline Champions, small dev team. And they started out being very, interactive with the community, answering a lot of questions, talking a lot. And then these were young developers, right, just coming out of school. And then they slowly tapered off, right? There was less and less communication coming from them. And now when you talk about a Valve dev compared to them, I mean, if you get hired at Valve, you have quite a bit of experience in the field already. You're a bit of a jack of all trades sort of player. You can do a variety of things, coding, developing, all sorts of things like that, right? You're a multi-talented person if you're working at Valve. And so you have a bit more experience and a bit longer in the tooth when it comes to how to interact with the community. And so what I think the devs are doing, and what the lesson was that the SLS, the Stunlock Studios devs learned, is that you have to be very careful about when you interact with the community, with the outspoken minority of the community in general. It's not 13 million people who are talking. It's, in general, we went over this the other day, right? The subreddit consists of 400,000 subs. And then you might have people commenting, or you might have people who are just subbed and who are just following it for the sake of following it to stay up to date. But with the people who are outspoken, you have to be just a little bit careful when you're a developer, because whatever you put down in a comment can be a hostage for the future, right? And that's I'm not sure if I'm saying that expression correctly, but don't give a hostage to the future, because whatever you say in the past, actually, yeah, for the last video that I just did, for example, right, some guy tried to hold me to what I said in the past and said that I had criticized the tournament structure, and now I'm acting surprised that there's oversaturation or whatever, when that's actually not the case at all. But you have to be careful about what you say when you're interacting with the community, because whatever you say goes down as law and you might get held to it. And so that's difficult when you're talking about developing a game, because you have a vision for the game on how the game you want the game to be played. And it's not just one developer when it's Valve. There's several of them that are thinking about CSGO on a daily basis. They have a sort of team vision on how they want the game to progress. But that vision is also changing somewhat based off of data that they gather off the player base, the casual player base that are coming in and playing the game regularly. And they're gathering all this data: which maps are getting played, which weapons are getting used, how is the accuracy, blah blah blah, all these sorts of things, right, is feeding into this vision. And so that vision might change. They might think one thing 3 months at the beginning of the year, for example, and then 6 months down the road, they're thinking something different, right? They're thinking, right, okay, based off of all of this data that we have now, we think that we need to make this decision instead, right? We need to make this call here. Now, that's where it gets tricky, right? Because if you respond regularly to the community, or if you're constantly involved with the community, everything you write down is going to be seen as law because you're the developer. And so 6 months down the line, if you want to make a decision contrary to the one that you would have made 6 months prior when you made the comment, that can get held against you, and it can get nasty. People can get disappointed because maybe what you said you were going to do or you were thinking about, it appealed to a lot of people, but then you do the opposite thing, and so those people are going to feel let down. You see what I'm saying here? It can get a little nasty, it can get a little tricky, and we've seen it happen in the past with devs where they'll make one thing, they'll make a comment, and then they'll do something different from that comment, and then they get hung out to dry because everybody's saying, but you said you were going to do this, and then it's almost like they might be putting shackles on themselves, right? As far as where they want it to go. And so Valve are like the opposite, right? Valve are they're very, very careful about what they say to the community so that they can have as much room to move in as possible. And when you're interacting with them at an event, it's the same thing, right? Talking with the developers is very much, I was going to say a trial in patience, right? But or a bit of an experience. It is, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to either guide you to what they're thinking about, right? So when we were talking about the CZ75 and how powerful pistols are, for example, there's a lot of questions of, why do we need to have such powerful pistols? And then they're just like, well, okay, they answer your question with a question, right? They're like, well, okay, what do you think needs to change? And then you'll be like, well, maybe not one shot headshot. And so they'll be like, well, okay, why is that? Right. And it's just, they try and get as much information as possible out of your viewpoint, right? So that they can then bring that information back to the Valve headquarters. They sit down. I imagine it's in like this, this gothic kind of room, right? Lots of shadows, pillars, sconces with flames. Gaben is sitting on his golden throne, right? And then and you hear chanting in the background, like Half-Life 3, Half-Life, right? And then they sit around and actually divulge the information that they gathered over the event, mull it over, and decide on what they want to do. Probably isn't actually like that. I know for a fact it isn't actually like that, but it's a fun image. But this is how they operate, right? They go to these events, they try and talk to the players, they try and talk to the teams, they try and talk to the commentators. Thorin talked recently about his encounter with them. About it wasn't a recent encounter, that was DreamHack Winter 2014, when it was pretty funny. He was just so incensed, so furious with the devs for their decision on the Existence case and Titan Cali getting banned. And so the developers, they said, well, we want to make sure that players are as aware of their teammates as possible. We don't want this to happen again. And so this is usually Valve's MO, right? We're going to make an example out of them. We're going to say, if you get caught with a cheater on your team, you can't just brush it off and say, oh, okay, whatever, it doesn't matter. We'll play the event. He gets caught, we'll ditch him and then pick somebody else up. They want you to be aware of what your teammates are doing as much as possible. And so worry about the consequences, right? You can't, if you have a cheater on your team, you can't just, shrug it off and walk away. You're going to suffer something there. You're going to suffer some kind of consequence. And so that was Thorin's rather, gripe with them. He had it out with them in public, and it was a pretty aggressive row. I mean, Thorin being Thorin, right, very to the point, to the throat, right, just tries to go for the jugular. The devs, same sort of thing, except much more on the defense, some Bruce Lee kind of maneuvers, definitely to try and parry all of his attacks. It was a fun thing, but they never really met again, as far as I know, or sat down to talk together, as far as I know. But what was my point? Because I'm going through like my memories now, and it was pretty funny. Like all the commentators sitting on one side of the circle, the Valve dev sitting on the other side of the circle. Thorin sits down, and he's got that gleam in his eye, right? You see and he just sees his opening, goes for the throat, the one thing that he cares about, right? And yeah, it's always fun when you're in the room when Thorin gets on that roast train. But that's beside the point. The point that I'm trying to make here is that I think it's very interesting that Ryan is being so vocal, but it's also a case of him being new, I think, to the team. And so he is making it apparent that, hey, there's a caveat here. I am new to the team. I want to learn as much as possible about this community. And that's very important. And I think we also need to be very careful with how we interact with Ryan. It's not, don't put on a false face and make it like we're all just, great guys chilling out. I mean, we can definitely express our displeasure with things, but just don't be super harsh with him, because the way that Valve works, and I mean, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, I'm not one to decide. And right, that's how they run their house, is that Valve is an open floor, open management sort of system. Imagine everybody, obviously it's a building, there's multiple stories to this building, but let's say for the sake of this exercise, it's one floor. And you just have everybody in that one room. And you say you have 10 projects getting worked on in this one room. All the Valve devs, the way that they operate when they approach projects is, what can they bring to a project with their personal skill set? And are they necessary for that project to succeed? And do they find that project interesting, right? It's all these sorts of things that are coming into their head. It's self-management at Valve. There is nobody looking over you saying, right, we need this done. Can you do this, please, blah, blah, blah. It's very much, like you look at a problem, you see a solution, you identify a solution, and you self-motivate. You go and handle it, right? Because you think, I can bring value to this, so I will go and work there and I will do this. And so that's how the CSGO devs work, right? We have some devs who have been with us a long time, and it's usually a pretty small number, between 5 and 10, I think, kind of fluctuates. But that's what actually happens with the CSGO devs, right? Is that Ryan, I'm assuming maybe he's a new hire, or maybe he's just coming in from a different coming in from a different department. He saw a sort of a situation where, hey, I can be of value here, and so he's decides, right, okay, I'll work here. And so it's actually, your desk has wheels on it, and you just kind of roll your desk over to that group and you start working in that group. We're still on that one floor, right? And that's how it goes. So you have desks that are rolling all over the place from people moving from project to project where they think they can bring value. So one of the things that I think we do need to keep in mind just a little bit, right? I'm not saying to tone everything down, but I am just saying, keep in mind that for there to be more devs on CSGO with the system that Valve have, basically how the community acts and reacts to changes that the devs make, etc., can influence how many people will be interested to come in and work on this project. Because it may be that they can bring value to the project, but when they show up and they see that every single change that gets made by Valve is very rarely seen as positive, usually results in massive backlash, and that the Valve devs are called ignorant and idiotic and incapable, and right, just every day, right? Not exactly the most welcoming atmosphere, right, for these devs to come into. It's a fresh dev. He's just like, whoa, you guys are getting shit on every day. I don't want any of that. Fucks off to another project. Maybe he goes and works on Dota 2. Who knows? Just so happens that the devs at Valve seem to really favor Dota 2. They really like it a lot. I think that Gabe Newell himself, plays Dota 2 and is a big fan. So I mean, there's obviously maybe a little bit more happening over there for Dota 2. But for CS, right? The devs, it's natural, and it just kind of happens, right? That the other devs will come in, or maybe they go out and get other devs, right, and say, hey, can you come and help us out with this? But for the most part, it's a self kind of managing system where the person needs to see, oh, this project, right? Okay, I can probably help with that, and then comes over and helps with it, right? So this actually went a little bit longer than normal. Kind of want these videos to be around 10 minutes. It is a bit more of a broad topic, and maybe I'll come back and visit it again, right? This is just kind of what I had today, where it was like Valve Ryan and his involvement with the community, Valve structure, and how they operate. Those were my 2 notes for today's video, and so now I'm just kind of expounding on that, but. And it's also a little bit the developer trap, right? Staying true to their vision versus becoming hostages to the community. These are my 3 notes for this video today, but that's kind of it, right? You have to be a little bit open, let's say. But I'm really excited to see a new dev, come in to help our existing dev team. That's really sick to me. And so, I'm glad that there's going to be more people that are going to be available to work on the game, especially now that they don't have a major to focus on for the end of this year. They can really just focus on the game, on continuing with good changes. I myself, after playing the game a bit now, feel pretty happy with these gun sound changes. I don't see why there's so much backlash against them. I think that the new USP sounds boss. I love the bass going off in my ears every time. It's like, boom, boom. Like, you really feel, like you hit that USP, it may be a little underwhelming pew-pew lasers before. Now you feel like, right, okay, I'm shooting a gun, right? That's silenced, but you can still feel the bass. I like some of these gun change sounds, and it's things like this, more things like this, actual game dev things that need to happen for the game. There was an excellent thread posted not too long ago that was basically, some guy demonstrating how distance is off in CSGO when it comes to sounds. He put two examples of being around a corner and a guy walking closer with an AK shooting, and there was no real difference in the sound. It just, he was shooting 30 feet away, shooting 10 feet away. There was no real difference. And then he had linked a Quake video showing how the directional sound in Quake worked. And it just sounded, night and day difference, right? And so I think we just need to give them some time. Right now, they don't have the major to focus on. They're going to have a lot more free time to just focus on the game. And so I'm excited to see what they're going to do to try and, change things up. Do they address the sound issue? What is next? What comes next? So we'll see. Exciting time, guys. Exciting times. But, just keep staying cool, and we'll see how things go. See you next time.